and you have more in common with a white author than you have with someone who's against all literature. So why must we always concentrate on color or on religion or this? There are other ways of connecting men.
I'll tell you this. When I left this country in 1948, I left this country for one reason only, one reason. I didn't care where I went. I might have gone to Hong Kong, I might have gone to Timbuktu, I ended up in Paris, on the streets of Paris, with $40 in my pocket on the theory that nothing worse could happen to me there than had already happened to me here. You talk about making it as a writer by yourself. You have to be able then to turn up all the antenna with which you live, because once you turn your back on this society, you may die. You may die. And it's very hard to sit at a typewriter and concentrate on that if you're afraid of the world around you. The years I lived in Paris did one thing for me. They released me from that particular social terror, which was not the paranoia of my own mind, but a real social danger visible in the face of every cop, every boss, everybody. I don't know what most white people in this country feel, but I can only include what they feel from the state of their institutions. I don't know if white Christians hate Negroes or not, but I know that we have a Christian church which is white and a Christian church which is black. I know, as Malcolm X once put it, that the most segregated hour in American life is high noon on Sunday. That says a great deal for me about a Christian nation. It means that I can't afford to trust most white Christians and certainly cannot trust the Christian church. I don't know whether the labor unions and their bosses really hate me. That doesn't matter, but I know I'm not in their unions. I don't know if the real estate lobby is anything against black people, but I know the real estate lobbies keep me in the ghetto. I don't know if the Board of Education hates black people, but I know the textbooks I give my children to read and the schools that we have to go to. Now, this is the evidence. You want me to make an act of faith, risking myself, my wife, my woman, my sister, my children, on some idealism which you assure me exists in America, which I have never seen.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson. Before we talked about that little video clip that I started the show out, which will lead into the show that I think should interest a whole lot of people out there who are watching. The gentleman that you saw answering all those questions on that video clip was one of my heroes, Brother James Baldwin. I think he was next to Malcolm, I think he was one of the greatest of our people of African descent, critical social critics when it comes to things such as race. He speaks truth to America. And a lot of times he would say things that white America does not want to hear, but we must have this dialogue. And that's the premise of this show. For those of you who are new to the show, the Umoja Circle or Unity Circle is an African-centered talk show where we correct errors where errors are found. And we introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. And I try with the many topics that I've been bringing forth on this show to deal with those tough questions. Because I always believe that America, or I should say white America, because there is actually two Americas. One of the things I'm a kind of touch on in the time that I have is not willing to face as we speak. And what I'm hearing in the media, in the news media, in conservative talk shows, in all kinds of discussion when it comes to race. Race has always been part of the American dialogue, but to a point. We just talk about it in a superficial way. But again, before I continue with my discussion, for those of you who are new, again, this is called the Umoja Circle, and we correct errors where errors are found and introduce facts where we find so many people working on fiction when it comes to people of African descent. And also we believe that when you have true dialogue, that's where you will find a shift in consciousness. Until you hear things from different perspectives. And the voices of people of African descent as some of you might notice in that video clip, that the white gentleman who was talking to James Baldwin, I think that was around 62, 63, when that discussion was going on, was acting like he didn't understand why James Baldwin was feeling the way he had, to do. He was at that time in America. He was coming from a perspective of the mythology that most white Americans are living on. In fact, in 1962, during that same time, around the time that discussion was going on, that panel discussion was going on, Gallup, the famous Gallup poll, did a poll in which they focused on white America. And they asked them questions about what they see from their perspective. Black America was getting any better in equality. Now, this is 1962, 2 years before the Civil Rights Act that had to be signed in 1964. But 85% of the people that were polled, white Americans, saw nothing wrong with the conditions of Black America. In fact, they claimed from their perspective that there was a lot of advancements in equality to white to white America, and a lot of advantages giving to Black Americans. Okay, they didn't see any problem. 85% of the people who were polled. And then you listen to how that white gentleman was talking to, Brother Baldwin, where he could not understand why, he was feeling that way, basically. Because that was the premise or the context of the questions and how he was asking those questions of Brother Baldwin. This brother wrote almost 60 books. And during that same period of time, if I remember, there were like basically 3 stations. There was ABC, NBC, and CBS. And on those screens in 62, in 63, you saw what was going on in Birmingham, where young Black boys and girls were being mowed down with water hoses. You're seeing Black men and women at counters in Woolworths and other restaurants being attacked by mobs of people who don't think they should be sitting there. Now, this is in the 1960s, all right? We were so-called given our citizenship by the 14th Amendment. We were supposedly freed from enslavement, that terrible condition that no longer existed by white American perspective since 1865, okay? And this is 1962. So nearly 100 years of experiencing and seeing and knowing and perpetrating all kinds of racial attacks on Black Americans just trying to be America, and we still have people in 1962 taking polls saying they don't see anything wrong. There's some kind of disconnect. And if you fast forward to 2021 and poll people, white Americans, about that, just listen to some of the comments when it comes to some of the topics that are being about race that is being talked about as we speak to this very day. There's that same attitude of, I don't understand. Why do you need to march for Black Lives Matter? Why, I don't understand why that you are claim that racism exists. Black people, y'all are racist too. And we're going to talk about some of those things today. In fact, I want to delve into that topic. I'm not afraid to do that here on the Umoja Circle. This is something that should take, if you're in going for your master's degree or in some college class, months and months and months. I'm going to try to concentrate. I won't touch on everything in just the 2 half-hour shows that I'm going to bring this topic up. I'm going to try to deal and answer at least 3 questions. I'm going to put them up on the screen. And these questions are this. What's the actual definition of racism? Because when I listen to people define racism, a lot of folks don't know what the heck they're talking about. And that's the problem. Even though we are in the computer age and information age, we still don't have a clue. Even though there's a whole lot of information on there, what information, how do we define that information as correct and accurate? That's the big problem here in America. Okay, how was racism established in America? Try to answer that question. I hate to say it, but white America is terrible at history, okay? And many of us here in Black America, we try to bring some information out in February with Black History Month. But white America, based on some of the topics and the way you define race or come across, and I know it's intimidating. Not saying you're bad people, but you don't know the history. And the third question that I think there's a lot of confusion is that I'm going to try to answer historically, factually. Can an African American be racist in America? Because I hear us being called racist. Even some of us are saying, well, he's a racist. In the context of what those questions will answer, you'll see that it might not be what you think. Okay? First of all, to white America, I must say, a strong opinion is not the same as informed knowledge. A lot of the things I see on conservative talk shows, conservative newspaper, coming out the mouths of conservative politicians are nothing more than strong and wrong opinions. They have nothing to do with informed, studied, research, historical knowledge in the context of when we say we're having a discussion in the topic of race. That's something we first got to understand and admit, okay? When we're saying we're talking about race and you see a panel discussions on a news broadcast or some kind of special put on by MSNBC or NBC or CBS, and they have one of their Black reporters do panel discussions, or they have some kind of meeting or focus group. And when you talk to the individuals that do not look like me, are white, their perspective that comes from how they were educated, that world does not really exist or never existed. But somehow they believe in that world. The world that those people who attacked the Capitol building on the 1st of January, 2021, talking about patriots and freedom and First and Second Amendment rights, coming from pure fantasy. But fantasy can make people do crazy things, as they done on the steps and how they attack the government in the name of freedom. You see, knowing a thing requires thinking, but thinking requires study. And most people do not study the opinions they bring forth when it comes to race. They don't look at race. Nobody could tell me what happened in 1870s or why we must, how you could understand what's going on today without understanding the history that brought you today is beyond me. If I meet you for the first time, say, and I want to understand the person that's in front of me in the present moment, or you want to understand me in the right now to develop something that goes on into the future, in the present moment, I have to go into the past and tell you about me. not right now, not in the present. In fact, the word present means present, okay? P-R-E space S-E-N-T. Something was sent to you from your past that affects you right now, that you're dealing with it. Whether it's the issue, a decision you made a year ago, 5 years ago, or 5 minutes ago, it's going to affect the present moment. In fact, the present moment grows out of the decisions that were made in the past. So unless you understand the history of America accurately, and yes, I know I'm skirting that critical race theory that came out in 1974. I talked about it in my previous 2 shows. You should go back and listen to it. That's one of the misinterpretations that are being used by the conservative media, and all wrong because they don't understand the history. They just talk about it. So if you talk about things and theories in the present moment without understanding if you talk about the present without understanding the precedents, and the precedent, I mean, what came before it to bring you to this point. Otherwise, you will not understand the light of that's shining in front of you. Okay, something that was there and the light of the past is dropped on it, and you don't have a clue of how it got there, why it's affecting you that way. If you can't understand those questions that you have to ask, because I hear that all the time when racist topics come in, like what a lot of the conversation that came from last year and George Floyd death, and how could a white cop in a system feel comfortable to kill a black man in front of the world. Okay, we look at it. Yeah, we call him a racist cop. See, but one of the trick bag that you got to understand, that's not the proper context of of that. Yeah, he's a prejudiced cop, and he is doing a racist thing, but it's not an isolated. If you put it in an isolated type of event, it will never make any sense. And you're missing the point of what we are talking about when it comes to racism in America. Like I said, no one requires thinking, but thinking requires study. Unless you took a class or made an effort, and I'm talking to white America, to really understand this thing called racism, we'll be having these conversations, and police officers like him will proliferate the criminal justice system well into the future. There is a history. Racism just didn't come out of some kind of natural state of being. See, racism is a system, not an event. So that's why I said when you go back to what happened to Brother George Floyd or all the other brothers or sisters that were in the last couple of years shown on video being murdered by police, we look at them as individual events. No, they are happening because there's a system in place that allow them to develop that kind of ideas, of perceptions of who we are as black men and women. I know white Americans rolling their eyes, some of them, those who don't want to hear about it. Why we always got to bring the race card? Well, you see, racism has always been, we always tend to get racism mixed up with prejudices, okay? A prejudice is a preconceived opinion, again, that opinion again, that is not based on any facts. It's just, a logical reasoning. I don't like green peas for some reason. Okay, you can give me all the logic in the world. It's just my, illogical opinion based on a particular taste or event that happened to me. So yes, I'll be prejudiced when it comes to, whether I support having green peas for dinner. I'm going to have my individual actions. But I don't have the power, which is racism. I'm not a part of a system that could destroy the green peas industry, okay? My particular prejudices, just like, you know, you have your particular prejudices as a white person against black people or black people against white people. Sure, we all have those things. They come out of a natural state of survival. People don't realize that those things that we use as prejudice, you better be prejudiced, you know, it comes from a survival instinct. In other words, thousands of years ago when you were in a new area and you wasn't you had to depend on the fauna and get your food from the environment around you, and you see some pretty mushrooms, you recognize it from where you came that they're mushrooms, but you have to have a little prejudice to these new ones in order to define whether they'll kill you or not. Because they're that fungus called a mushroom. You have to have some kind of, to prevent you from automatically going and stuffing them in your mouth. So that prejudice came out of that survival mechanism until you can do the proper things to go beyond your own opinion that it might be safe, like it was wherever you came from, but this strand might be detrimental to you, and you do the proper things to satisfy that it's safe to eat, safe for your family to eat. That's the origin of prejudices, okay? That's the instinct. So when you say, you know, all human beings are prejudiced, well, they develop that for survival sake. Excuse me. But when it comes to social structures, and you're a member of a particular group that by law created environments that tells me how I'm supposed to function around you. Hold on, let me go back to the origins. I said we'll start talking. You can't understand today until you understand the past. And we're talking about the origins. To answer the first question, well, what is racism? Racism is a system, okay, a social construct that has particular social functions. It's not an individual thing. It's a series of systems. You construct your police system based on certain laws and regulations. Your medical system, your military system, when you create a society. Well, so when we came into 1619, you know, in August, 400 or so years ago from this month, when a ship called the White Lion brought 20 enslaved Africans and traded them for food on close to Jamestown, Virginia. Prior to that, there was no such thing as racism. In fact, there was no such thing as being white. None of the documentations that was written about each other indicate whiteness. You were either English, Dutch, German, and I'm talking from white American perspective, or an African that you stole from the continent. Whiteness had no meaning. But what happened was an economic change. When the New World was founded and all this new land was seen, ignoring the native people who were there for thousands of years, but you could make money growing tobacco and sugarcane in the Caribbean, or cotton or rice in South Carolina because of the humidity that's there and the swampiness of the land, which is similar to what happened in other parts of the world where rice is grown. But the problem is those type of products need gang labor. Okay? And this was the time in the 1500s, 14, 15, 1600s, when Europe was moving from mercantile, type of system to a capitalist type system, where individuals in a capitalist type system own the tools, own the land, own the means of production, and control the people who work those lands. My allergies are acting up, so excuse me. And they created, and people were making profits and profitable from these systems. And where were they getting these gang labor forces? Well, they created laws that were honored by the church, these rationales. The Catholic Church, the Pope, gave England, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, all these, they gave them contracts. Okay. And what that got to do with racism? Well, okay, it's a construct, a system that was construct to serve a social function. And the social function was capitalism. And you had to justify doing high crimes. Kidnapping is a high crime. You had to justify, and if you're religious, you had to justify why you're doing it. Well, they're heathens, or whatever reality you had to come into it. So they had to be different than you. These savages that look like me, even though the earliest form of human beings genetically look like me. But you had to forget all that. You had to create a whole system based on the color of skin, differentiating from another group's skin color by law. To understand this concept of racism, I will continue this and go into it more deeply in the next show. I just wanted to lead you into this, to give you some background. Racism is a social construct. It's social engineering. And I'll just leave you with that thought. Knowing requires thinking. Thinking requires study. Social engineering is how we establish racism in America. Till next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye.